Whispers of the Wild, a journey into nature. The first light of dawn pierced the horizon, casting golden hues across the rolling hills. A dense mist hung low over the valley, blending seamlessly with the soft glow of the early morning sun. In the distance, the towering silhouettes of the forest stood tall, like ancient sentinels guarding secrets buried deep within. This was nature in its purest form, untouched, untamed, and whispering of stories long forgotten. A young man named Elias stood at the edge of this vast wilderness, breathing in the crisp, dewy air. He had spent years in the concrete jungle, the city's noise and pollution slowly suffocating his spirit. The city offered many things: opportunity, excitement, and connection, but what it could never offer was silence. The kind of silence that allows a person to hear the quiet heartbeat of the earth, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the trickle of a stream cutting through the forest. That silence, Elias knew, was where truth resided. And so he had packed his bags, left the city behind, and set out for a journey into the wild. The wilderness that stretched before him was vast and full of mystery. It wasn't marked on any map, and few ventured into its depths. Locals called it Silva Antica, the ancient wood. They spoke of it with both reverence and fear, whispering tales of old gods, spirits, and creatures that still roamed its hidden paths. To many, these were just stories, but to Elias, there was something about the way the trees seemed to call to him, beckoning him into their embrace, that made him believe the stories might hold more truth than he initially thought. Elias hoisted his backpack over his shoulder and took his first step into the unknown. The ground beneath him was soft and rich, covered in moss and fallen leaves. Each step he took was met with the crunch of twigs and the soft rustle of the forest floor. As he ventured deeper, the sounds of the outside world faded away, replaced by the steady rhythm of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the gentle breeze that seemed to whisper through the branches. The forest of giants. The trees of Silva Antica were unlike any Elias had ever seen. They were ancient, their trunks wide enough to fit several men standing shoulder to shoulder. Their roots twisted and curled like the fingers of giants, reaching deep into the earth, while their branches stretched high into the sky, forming a dense canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the forest floor. The bark was rough and gnarled, covered in thick moss, and in some places, strange carvings adorned the trunk's symbols that looked both natural and deliberate, as if the forest itself was trying to communicate. Elias paused, placing his hand on one of the giant trees. The bark was cool to the touch, and as his fingers traced the ancient carvings, he felt a deep sense of connection, as if the tree was alive in a way beyond the physical. The air here was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingled with something sweet and faint, like the perfume of wildflowers carried on the wind. It was intoxicating, pulling him deeper into the woods. As the day wore on, Elias found himself completely immersed in the forest's rhythm. Time seemed to slow down, the hours melting into each other as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The path he followed was faint, barely visible beneath the undergrowth, but something in the forest seemed to guide him. There was no fear, no sense of being lost, just a deep sense of belonging, as if the forest had accepted him into its embrace. Along the way, Elias encountered streams that cut through the landscape, their water crystal clear and cold. He knelt beside one, cupping his hands to drink, the cool liquid refreshing him. As he drank, he noticed tiny fish darting beneath the surface, their silver bodies flashing in the sunlight. Nearby, frogs croaked lazily, their sounds mingling with the soft hum of insects. It was around midday when Elias stumbled upon a clearing. The trees parted, revealing a meadow bathed in sunlight. Wildflowers of every color dotted the landscape, their petals swaying gently in the breeze. At the center of the meadow stood a massive oak tree, its branches reaching high into the sky like the arms of an ancient deity. The tree seemed to radiate power, its presence dominating the clearing. Drawn to it, Elias approached the oak. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. At the base of the tree was a small stone altar, covered in moss and surrounded by offerings. Flowers, feathers, and stones had been carefully arranged, as if someone or something had placed them there recently. Kneeling beside the altar, Elias felt a sudden sense of reverence wash over him. This place was sacred, and though he didn't fully understand why, he knew that the oak tree held significance. The song of the windy air in the clearing was different, charged with energy, alive with possibility. Elias closed his eyes and let the wind wash over him, feeling its gentle caress on his skin. It was then that he heard a soft, melodic hum carried on the breeze. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sounds of the forest, but as he focused on it, the hum grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't a natural sound, like the call of birds or the rustling of leaves. It was something else, something ancient. Elias opened his eyes and scanned the clearing, but there was no one in sight. The hum persisted, growing more complex, turning into a melody that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the air. It was beautiful and haunting, like a forgotten song from a time long past. Unable to resist, Elias followed the sound, letting it guide him deeper into the forest. The path grew narrower, the trees pressing in on all sides. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick canopy now, casting the forest floor in shadow. Yet the song remained, leading him forward. As he walked, the forest began to change. The air grew cooler, and the plants took on an otherworldly appearance. Ferns with iridescent leaves, flowers that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The ground beneath his feet felt softer, almost spongy, as if the forest itself was alive and breathing. Finally, after what felt like hours, Elias reached the source of the melody. Before him was a hidden grove, unlike anything he had ever seen. At its center was a pool of water, perfectly still and mirror-like, reflecting the canopy above. Surrounding the pool were stones arranged in a circular pattern, each one etched with the same strange symbols he had seen on the trees. And there, sitting at the edge of the pool, was a figure. She was ethereal, her form delicate and almost translucent, as if she were part of the forest itself. Her hair was long and flowed like water, shimmering in the dim light, and her eyes were the color of the deepest part of the ocean. She sat with her back to him, her fingers lightly touching the surface of the pool, creating ripples that seemed to dance in time with the melody. Elias froze, unsure of what to do. He had heard stories of forest spirits, but he had never imagined encountering one. The figure turned her head slightly, as if sensing his presence, and the melody abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, the air charged with an unspoken tension. Without turning fully to face him, the figure spoke, her voice soft but commanding, like the wind through the trees. "You have come far, wanderer." Elias swallowed, his throat dry. Yes, I heard the song. It led me here." The figure stood slowly, her movements graceful and fluid, as though she were floating rather than walking. She turned to face him fully, and Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful, but not in a way that could be easily described. There was something otherworldly about her, something ancient and powerful. "The song is not for all to hear," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "Yet it called to you." "Why?" Elias shook his head. "I don't know. I'm just searching." The spirit tilted her head, studying him. "Searching for what?" He paused, unsure of how to answer. What was he searching for? He had left the city, seeking something more, something beyond the noise and chaos of modern life. But what exactly had he hoped to find? The truth was, he didn't know. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Peace, maybe? A connection to something bigger?" The spirit's gaze softened slightly, as if she understood. "The forest is old, older than you can imagine. It remembers. It listens. It knows the hearts of those who walk its paths. You have been heard, Elias." He blinked in surprise. "You know my name?" The spirit smiled faintly. "The forest knows many things." The guardian of the Grovith spirit gestured toward the pool. "This is the heart of the forest, the place where all things begin and end. Few are allowed here, for it is sacred." Elias approached cautiously, kneeling beside the pool. The water was impossibly clear, and as he gazed into it, he saw something moving beneath the surface images, memories, swirling like smoke. He saw the faces of people long gone, glimpses of lives lived and forgotten, all intertwined with the life of the forest. "What is this place?" he asked in awe. "The Grove of Memory," the spirit replied. "It holds the history of this land, of all who have walked its paths. The trees, the stones, the water they remember. And now, so do you." Elias looked up at her, a sense of reverence washing over him. "Why did the song call to me?" The spirit's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps the forest sees in you what you cannot yet see in yourself. You seek peace, yes, but you also seek understanding. There is a part of you that is lost, disconnected from the world. The forest can help you find it if you're willing to listen." Elias nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of truth in her words. He had always felt disconnected, as though something vital was missing from his life. The city had offered distractions, but never fulfillment. Here, in the heart of the forest, he felt something stir within him, something ancient and powerful, as if the forest was awakening a part of him that had long been dormant. "I'm willing," he said quietly. The spirit smiled. "Then you shall learn. But be warned, what you seek may not be easy to find. The forest is vast, and its secrets are not always kind." Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, but he nodded in understanding. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to turn back now. The spirit knelt beside him, her fingers lightly touching the surface of the pool. The water rippled, and the images shifted, showing a path winding through the forest. "Follow the path," she said. "It will lead you to what you seek. But remember, the forest is alive. It watches. It tests. Trust your instincts, and you will find your way." With that, she stood and began to fade, her form dissolving into the mist that surrounded the grove. "Good luck, Elias," she whispered, her voice like the wind. And then she was gone. Elias stood in the grove, feeling both exhilarated and unnerved. The forest had revealed a glimpse of its power, and he knew that his journey was far from over. Taking a deep breath, he turned toward the path that had appeared before him, the one the spirit had shown him in the pool. It was faint, barely visible beneath the undergrowth, but it was there. With a sense of determination, Elias stepped onto the path, ready to face whatever the forest had in store. The trials of the forest as Elias ventured deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler, the trees taller and more imposing. The path twisted and turned, sometimes fading entirely, forcing him to rely on his instincts to find his way. The deeper he went, the more alive the forest seemed to become. The trees whispered to each other in a language he couldn't understand, their leaves rustling in the wind like secret conversations. The ground beneath his feet pulsed with energy, as though the forest itself was watching his every move. Days passed, though it was hard to tell how many. The sun barely penetrated the thick canopy, and the nights were filled with strange sounds creatures that roamed the forest, unseen but always present. Elias was never truly alone, though he saw no other people. He felt the eyes of the forest on him, as if the trees themselves were testing him, challenging him to prove his worth. There were moments when the path seemed to disappear entirely, leaving him lost in the dense undergrowth. But each time, something would guide him, a flash of light, a distant sound, or a feeling deep in his gut that told him which way to go. The forest, it seemed, had a will of its own, and it was leading him somewhere. But the journey was not without its dangers. One afternoon, as Elias was making his way through a particularly dense thicket, he heard a low growl. Freezing in place, he scanned the trees, his heart pounding in his chest. The growl came again, closer this time. His eyes darted from tree to tree, but he saw nothing. Then, from the shadows, a creature emerged. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A massive wolf, its fur as black as night, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Its size alone was enough to send a wave of fear through Elias, but it was the intelligence in its gaze that truly unsettled him. This was no ordinary animal. It was something more, something ancient and powerful. The wolf circled him slowly, its movements graceful and predatory. Elias stood his ground, his heart racing. He knew that running would be futile. The wolf would catch him easily. Instead, he focused on his breathing, trying to calm the rising panic. The wolf stopped in front of him, its eyes locked onto his. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, neither moving. Then, to Elias's surprise, the wolf bowed its head slightly, as if in acknowledgement, before turning and disappearing back into the shadows. Elias exhaled shakily, his legs trembling. The encounter had been brief, but it had left a lasting impression. The forest was testing him, and he had passed at least for now. The heart of the forest as the days wore on, Elias began to notice a change in himself. He felt more in tune with the forest, more connected to its rhythms. The once foreign sounds of the trees and animals now felt familiar, comforting even. He had learned to trust his instincts, to listen to the whispers of the wind and the songs of the birds. The forest, it seemed, had accepted him. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting the forest in a soft golden light, Elias reached the end of the path. Before him stood a massive stone archway, covered in moss and vines. Beyond it lay a clearing, bathed in the glow of the setting sun. At the center of the clearing stood a tree unlike any other, a massive oak, its branches twisted and gnarled, its bark shimmering with an otherworldly light. This, Elias knew, was the heart of the forest. The air in the clearing was thick with energy, pulsing with life. As Elias stepped forward, he felt a deep sense of reverence wash over him. The oak tree towered above him, its branches reaching high into the sky, as if connecting the earth to the heavens. The ground beneath it was covered in soft moss, and at the base of the tree was a small stone altar, similar to the one he had seen in the meadow. Kneeling beside the altar, Elias placed his hand on the cool stone. The moment his fingers touched the surface, he felt a surge of energy course through him, filling him with a sense of peace and clarity. The forest, it seemed, had granted him its blessing. Closing his eyes, Elias let the energy wash over him, allowing himself to become one with the forest. The trees, the animals, the wind, they were all connected, part of a greater whole. And now he was part of it too. For hours, Elias sat in the clearing, communing with the forest. The sun set, and the stars appeared in the sky, casting a soft glow over the clearing. The night was alive with the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the gentle hum of insects. And through it all, Elias felt a deep sense of peace. He had found what he had been searching for, not just peace, but a connection to something greater than himself. The forest had shown him the truth, that all things are connected, that life is a cycle of birth and death, growth and decay. And in that cycle, there is beauty, power, and meaning. As dawn broke and the first light of day pierced the horizon, Elias stood and made his way back to the archway. He had come to the forest seeking answers, and he had found them. But more importantly, he had found himself. With one last look at the heart of the forest, Elias stepped through the archway and began the journey back, the whispers of the wild still echoing in his mind. The return when Elias finally emerged from the forest. Days later, he was a different man. The city no longer called to him, its noise and chaos seeming distant and unimportant. He had found something far more valuable: peace, connection, and a deeper understanding of the world around him. The locals, upon seeing him, marveled at his return. Few ventured into Silva Antigua, and even fewer returned. They asked him what he had seen, what he had learned, but Elias only smiled. The forest's secrets were not his to share. They were meant for those who were willing to listen. And so, Elias lived out his days at the edge of the forest, tending to the land and living in harmony with nature. The city was a distant memory, and in its place was a life of peace, beauty, and connection to the natural world. The forest had taught him its lessons, and he was forever changed. For in the heart of the wild, Elias had discovered the true meaning of life, and it was beautiful.